Rogue's Indy Functional Trainer is their latest cable add-on and what's becoming a very impressive lineup. We liked their FM single stack, were blown away by the twin, and the Rhino trainer made me realize how much I missed having a Rhino, so I put one in my Indy. The issue is, with Rogue releasing 4 unique rack integrated cable systems within the past year, it's getting a little confusing trying to figure out which one's right for you, if any of them are. After all, we've reviewed a ton of alternatives from various companies, including Rep's Athena, which is probably the Indy's closest competitor. The Indy is essentially a beefed up Americanized version of it, so cue the screaming eagle and wave your American flag. We're gonna make some comparisons to help you decide which to choose. Well, that and because I needed to justify the absurd amount of money these Rogue reviews have cost me, since I had to sell my FM twin stack and Rhino functional trainer to fund this review because I buy all of our Rogue equipment. So if you enjoy our content, then please use our affiliate links if you purchase something, because I cannot be more upfront and honest with you than when I say, without your support as a small family-owned channel, we literally cannot keep making content. So thank you. Rogue's Indy is essentially a functional trainer that you add on to your Rogue rack, giving you access to an absurd amount of cable movements. This is Rogue's Monster Rack. They're 3x3 rack with 1-inch holes spaced every 2 inches on all sides of the uprights and cross members. 3x3 racks are the pinnacle for home gyms. Now, keep in mind I said pinnacle, not necessarily the most logical, because they're also large and expensive. Of course, a rack with 5/8-inch holes like Rogue's Monster Lite can save you some money, especially since the attachments often cost significantly less, although you'll have to wait for Rogue to release the Indy on it. But much like with the FM Twin and FM Single, I'm sure those versions are coming. That's an issue you'll have to consider with 5/8-inch racks. Companies almost always release their 1-inch versions first, and if you look across all companies, the 1-inch ecosystem of attachments is simply larger, so you'll always have more options. So do you save a little money and exercise some patience, or fully embrace your American roots and go all in? Don't look at me for advice there. I was dumb enough to buy all 4 of Rogue's add-ons for these reviews. What's so great about 3x3 racks? They're modular, meaning you can build off of them or attach things onto them in any direction, and much like Legos, they give you nearly limitless possibilities, especially considering much of the time you can put attachments from one manufacturer onto another's rack. They're also basically indestructible because they're using 11-gauge steel, so throw what you want at them, they'll be fine. Are 3x3 racks overkill? Most likely, but that doesn't make them any less awesome. It also means you probably don't have to bolt them down, at least not with the dual Indies sitting on it. Not that I'd legally recommend otherwise, but if you can tip these dual 300-pound stacks, you'd have to be dumber than me, which would be quite an accomplishment. The Indy adds a lot of functionality without affecting the footprint of your rack, although it does add about 1 inch to the height. You can build it in a lot of different ways too, from a compact 4-post that at 80 inches tall will fit into your basement, all the way up to this monstrosity. A 6-post monster rack with a drop-in Rhino and dual Indies. And I say dual because you can buy the Indies individually if you just wanted one side for some reason. There's different heights and depths to choose from. Our rack is 30 inches deep and 90 inches tall, by the way. Rogue has 13 different finish options, various pull-up bars, and many other ways to customize your rack, like adding the shrouds, which gives it a beefier, more commercial look. They cost $300 though, so you're gonna have to convince yourself it's the looks that count, because they don't do anything functionally, although I do like hanging stuff from them with my Amazon magnet hooks you may have already seen from our storage video. Go ahead and tell me that wasn't a smooth self-promotion. I'll link them in the description. The Indy has independent weight stacks, meaning each side functions entirely independent from the other, which means 2 people can use this at once, and it gives you true unilateral capabilities. There's nothing linking the 2 stacks, an important note to make because some of Rogue's systems are linked. At its simplest, it's a functional trainer add-on for your rack, It has 300-pound stacks and a 2-to-1 pulley ratio. That pulley ratio gives you twice the cable travel, but effectively cuts the usable weight in half. That means you'll have plenty of cable to work with and should be able to pretty much do any exercise you want on it. Even on an 80-inch tall rack, you'll still have about 5 feet of cable to work with and shouldn't be limited. As for the usable weight, with a functional trainer, you want a low starting weight and smaller weight increments, which that 2-to-1 ratio gives you. With the Indy starting at 10 pounds and jumping 5 pounds at a time, all the way up to a maximum of 150 pounds per side, this works well for those type of cable movements, although I'd still like to see a rack integrated system like this with a lower starting weight, because 10 pounds can be a challenge to certain people on some exercises, which is why our Voltra is sitting here. Winnie uses it when she needs a lower starting weight. Admittedly, a very expensive solution to a small problem. Although if your wife isn't interested in you spending rogue money on a setup like this, maybe showing her the cost of a few Voltras would help your case. If you need to use more than 150 pounds, you can link the stacks to access all 300 pounds by using something like Darko's Longy Bar, which works well for rows, but for lat pulls, it'll lower your starting point, which may limit your range of motion, although you could just sit on the floor if needed. Also, it's worth noting that this isn't really designed to be an ideal setup for things like lat pull downs and low rows. You can make it work and could argue overall it works well enough, but we can't really dock rogue points there, because if you wanted a rack integrated lat and low row, I'd just look at the FM twin stack. Maybe this is a good time to break down Rogue's rack cable systems, because there's enough options to even make my head spin, but by understanding the differences between them, you'll be able to decide which of these, or the various ones we're about to compare them to, makes sense for you. The twin stack is essentially just the Indy with a lat pull down and low row added on. So same exact independent 300-pound stacks, same pulley ratios, trolleys, and so on. They're basically using identical components throughout, with the only major difference being you gain a low row with an adjustable foot plate to brace against, and a dedicated lat pull down with a higher pull point, so you won't have any range of motion issues. Also, when using the center pull points of the lat pull down and low row, the stacks are automatically connected, giving you access to all 300 pounds of weights, and you'll have a single connection point rather than needing a bar to connect the two stacks like you do with the Indy. It's actually one of the things I prefer about the twin stack over the Aries. While I love the versatility of Rep's dual pull points, I've found a lot of ways to integrate them into my workouts. I also completely ignore the dual high pull points, because connecting and disconnecting them from overhead is a bit of a tedious process, and I just got sick of fighting with them and found the ease of using Rogue's single clip-in point to be so much quicker. But like with anything, there's trade-offs, and it depends what you want to do with your setup. That's why I sold my FM Twin and built this. Well, that and to fight off the crippling debt of making these videos, but I've got an Adonis cable tower already and Rogue's CTM1 on the way for a review, so I didn't need the lat pull and low row functionality. What I wanted was a Rhino, so why not keep the Rhino trainer we reviewed? After all, you can build that rack with or without functional trainer capabilities, and you can even build a Rhino Indy, which has the independent selectorized stacks with the Rhino integrated in. Honestly, had Rogue offered all the configurations they do for the Rhino trainer now versus when I reviewed it, I might have kept it, but at the time, the entire thing had to be plate loaded. So the Rhino trolley was your single weight source, meaning the lat pull, low row, Rhino, and functional trainer trolleys were all connected to it. That made it a little easier to set up and load, although not ideal for supersets because you'd have to change the weights between exercises. Also, when using the functional trainer trolleys, your arms were technically linked. Although they felt equal resistance, it wasn't a truly unilateral experience like the Indy, Twin Stack, and machines like Reps, Aries, or Athena are. Simply put, independent stacks are superior, but also more expensive. With Rogue now offering the Rhino Indy, much like with our Indy with the drop-in Rhino, I get my selectorized stacks, which gives me a little more versatility and options when I work out. Just keep in mind, the Rhino Indy's lat pull down and low row are plate loaded. Only the functional trainer trolleys use the weight stacks, and that's because the Rhino has to be plate loaded. So unless Rogue does some kind of wild redesign that I really don't see them doing, that'll always be the case. Selectorized stacks are more expensive, but they're also quicker and more efficient. Just move a pin to change the weight, and when every workout is a race against time with two babies who love to ruin their parents' workouts by refusing to nap, every minute counts. Also, the Indy, much like the Twin Stack, is probably the smoothest cable system I've ever used. The bearings in the aluminum pulleys are fantastic. Rogue does not cut corners with these systems. That's not to say the Rhino trainer was bad, but it's a pretty complex machine, and the more linked elements you introduce, the more inherent resistance you'll get in the pulley system. And truth be told, the Rhino trolley just isn't as smooth as Rogue's selectorized stacks are. So it was good, but this is fantastic. If you need all that functionality though, the new Rhino Indy would be my first choice. I think I actually might have paid more to remove the lat pull and low row than I would have had I just gotten the Rhino Indy, especially since I bought the narrow footplate to make the drop-in Rhino fit in here. But now that I've got both plates side by side, I think I'd just have cut the edges off myself and saved a few dollars. Of course, that's not all of Rogue's rack cable systems, but much like Rogue has ignored the Slinger for years, we're gonna ignore the FM single stack. All right, not really, it's just that it is basically the Rhino trainer without the Rhino belt squat. It is Rogue's cheapest option, not words that typically go together, but if you're looking for the lat pull down, low row, and functional trainer capabilities, it's Rogue's cheapest all-in-one, and it can be ordered plate loaded or selectorized. Just realize both versions add depth to the back of your rack. Really, the only thing Rogue's missing in this new rack cable ecosystem is a rack integrated lat pull down and low row add-on like Rep and others offer for their racks, because that would allow you to build out your rack essentially in any configuration, as well as let you add on to your rack in increments, because let's face it, these build outs aren't cheap. I will give Rogue props though, because my relentless bullying seems to have paid off, as they've done a great job of responding to my and the community's feedback. Admittedly, not a strong suit of theirs in the past. When I called them out for not providing a hole for the weight pin to sit in when using the lowest weight on their stacks, they came up with a solution and sent it out to everyone. Like with the Indy, they've added 80-inch height options to the Twin Stack and are adding more depth options for the Rhino rack variants to give you more space for things like incline benching in a 4-post Rhino setup. They could still do a better job of documenting the actual colors of their racks though, because their renderings aren't cutting it, although the addition of a small picture to the listing does help a little. I have done my best to help the community out by picking different finishes each build, but it's also only a matter of time before my wife kills me for constantly rearranging this gym and buying more of these things. The fact that I've bought 4 of them is why I can't really comment too much on assembly. At this point, I'm basically on autopilot. So while I think it's not bad, how many people have taught their 10-year-old to use an impact wrench and how to route cables? I do like that Rogue gives you all the necessary tools to put it together, and I'm holding out hope that every other company takes a note from them and starts including stickers showing you how to route the cables, because it's little touches like that and their inclusion of the monster strips and how they organize hardware that makes the entire process smoother and easier. That's not to say we didn't have a few issues. The directions definitely weren't quite ready at launch, since Rogue was reusing a few pages from the twin stack assembly, which made things a little confusing at times, but I guess that's the appeal of digital directions. They can be updated, and Rogue's already begun to do so. Not that that helps anyone who had issues at launch, and I'd still prefer to have a set of physical instructions sent. As a generalization though, I think Rogue does better than most with their directions. They've also got a better build quality than I think I'd say just about everyone else that makes an all-in-one style rack like this. I've seen and reviewed what feels like countless rack systems, and yet I keep coming back to Rogue, which either speaks to my lack of financial responsibility or how well done this is. Whether it's the cable shrouds, flush mount top cross members, or the overbuilt trolleys, nobody does it quite like Rogue. To be fair, many of their touches don't affect functionality, but at least you'll feel a little better about paying those made in America prices for what amounts to probably the nicest piece of equipment I own, which is one heck of an accomplishment. You could definitely save some money by buying Rep's Athena over this. Rep's add-on cost about $500 less, and the plate-loaded Athena would save you even more. As you build out those racks and add accessories, that price difference will become even larger, and let's be honest, the two systems are functionally equivalent. That cost savings comes from the fact that Rep imports their equipment and that their included handles and other touches can't match Rogue's quality. The Athena's stacks also aren't quite as heavy, maxing out at 110 pounds each versus 150 pounds on the Indy. The cables aren't quite as smooth, nor is it as well made, but it's still very good, and unless you had them side by side, you might not really even notice or maybe even care. I'd share a similar sentiment with the Indy up against Fringe's Dane 2.0. You can save even more money there. It's a solid system. We thought Fringe did a great job of addressing our criticisms from the Dane 1.0, but Rogue really is a step or two above everyone else here. I will say Rogue can overbuild things at times. I love these trolleys, but if they're not a symbol of how over the top we can be as Americans, I don't know what is. I mean, look at them. They're massive, which means they're heavy, but Rogue's dual handle system and integrated rollers make them easy to move around. The UHMW on the front keeps them from getting banged up and allows the cable to easily rotate along them so that they always line up perfectly with whatever angle you pull at. Those kinds of things may seem small, but they all add up. The only issue I've got with the trolleys is, depending on the attachment you're using, their size can be problematic. But I've got a normal amount of attachments, and it's pretty rare that me or Winnie find any issues unless we're specifically looking for them, like when we're researching and testing for these reviews. So is that a nitpick? Maybe. I do get a lot of crap for being overly critical at times, but believe me, I'd make a lot more money off of affiliates if I glossed over negatives and neglected to mention things. The Indy though, it's fantastic if this is what you're looking for. Now, there are definitely more racks I could compare this to, so maybe it's time I redid my Power Rack Buyer's Guide. Until then, you've made it this far into this video, so press subscribe, and if you've got quite a few hours to spend, you should watch all of our rack reviews on this playlist here, and let me know what you think of the Indy. Thanks to our patrons for keeping this channel going, and thanks for watching.